In this unit, we consider another property of the noun phrase, which is the property of deictic reference, best realized through the existence of demonstratives. That what a demonstrative does is indicate the relative distance of a referent in the speech situation. We shall examine demonstratives mean and the issues and components of the proper description of demonstrative, illustrated through the pattern of South Asian languages. Human communication is a triadic behavior involving the speaker, the hearer, and the entities talked about. While the speaker and hearer are connected by the now of the speech event, the entity that is referred to might not be. And therefore, speakers and hearers often use linguistic expressions to indicate to each other what their spatial or temporal location is. What linguistic expressions do then that are used to describe a direct referential link between language and the situation outside the world is these expressions are called deictic expressions. In order to refer to objects and entities in time and space, the successful use of deixis involves the identification of a deictic center, or origo, as Lyons 1977 calls it. In the unmarked case, the deictic center is the speaker's location at the time of the utterance, and therefore the deictic expression she uses indicates locations of points in time relative to her location. Speakers' locations can, of course, change within and across speech events. Therefore, the reference of deictic expressions is always variable and not fixed. Consider, for example, here and there. The spatial referent of this term changes according to the speech context. The here, as in the here in my room or here in Delhi, do not refer to the same spatial location, though they both use here. Neither does there in the cupboard or in the phrase put it there. The best description of this contextual variability is in terms of the deictic center. Here marks the area conceptualized as the deictic center, and there indicates a location that is not included in this area. Typically, two basic categories of deixis have been distinguished: participant deixis and object deixis. Participant deixis encodes the role of speech participants, usually by pronominals, speaker, hearer, and other, which we have already discussed, and also their social relationship to each other, either reflected by intimacy and or honorificity marking. Object deixis is indicated in linguistic expressions referring to aspects of the situational and discourse context. This subsumes place, that is reference to concrete objects and locations in the situation surrounding the speech participants; time, reference to a point in time relative to the moment of the speech event; and discourse, reference to linguistic elements in the ongoing discourse. We will look at demonstrative values first, that is reference to the deictic center, the term of the speaker or the hearer. Demonstratives are commonly divided into pronominal demonstrative, which substitute for a noun or a noun phrase, and adnominal demonstrative, which accompany a noun. In English, there is no distinction between these two forms, as this and that may be used as independent pronouns, that is, as pronominal demonstratives. So, if I say I don't like this, I'm using this as a pronominal demonstrative. Or it can co-occur with a noun, as in I like this book, in which case it's an adnominal demonstrative. In other languages, however, there is a difference in morphological difference in terms of pronominal and adnominal demonstratives. In Turkish, only pronominal demonstratives can be inflected for case, whereas French uses different demonstratives for the two types. Celui or cel are the pronominal demonstratives, whereas sir and set are the adnominal ones. In Hindi, as a South Asian language gives us examples similar to French. The pronominal demonstratives are yaha and waha, but they are different, however, visibly derivationally related stems from the adnominal ye, wo. Only ye and wo can take a oblique form, yaha and waha cannot. In the Munda language Khadya, from the work of Peterson, this derivational relationship is even more transparent, where pronominal demonstratives are built by suffixing human, non-human and locative markers to the adnominal demonstrative. For example, u is this, ute is here, hin is that, and hinte is there. Similarly, the Tibeto-Burman Kuki-Chin language Mizo, pronominal demonstratives involve a reduplication of the adnominal demonstrative. So, kha, that, and kha, there. Only pronominal demonstratives in Mizo also inflect for number. There is also a third class of demonstrative, as proposed by Deixis, 1999, what he calls identificational demonstratives, which are found to occur in copula and non-verbal clauses. He illustrates this class through Pohnpeian, where a distinct set of pronominal demonstratives is used in verbal and non-verbal clauses. Demonstratives indicate essentially place, Deixis. Diesel says that their communicative use is primarily to establish joint attention of the discourse participants to a particular entity, pointing to the numerous observations in the literature that demonstratives are frequently accompanied by a pointing gesture. Diesel suggests that demonstratives create a new focus of attention, or at least indicate a contrast between two previously established references. This is in complete contrast to person Deixis, which becomes automatically activated by the speech event. As soon as someone speaks, there is a speaker and a hearer are automatically identified. The feature values of spatial demonstratives is based on their relation to the Deictic center. In the languages of the world, the following systems have been found. So languages can make a distinction between proximal demonstratives versus distal demonstrative. This is a two-way Deictic system involving a contrast between the area included or identical to the Deictic center, the proximal demonstrative, and distal, outside or beyond the Deictic center. English and Hindi are two examples of these languages. A second group of languages can make a distinction between proximal, medial, and distal. This is a three-way Deictic system involving a contrast between proximal, included in the Deictic center, distal, outside or beyond the Deictic center, and a midway, beyond the Deictic center, but not really very far away system. This is for example, Irish is such a language. A third system is proximal versus distal versus remote. Three-way Deictic center involving a contrast which establishes a region far away from the Deictic center. Santali is one such language. Another system can be between speaker proximal and hearer's proximal versus distal. This is a three-way Deictic system involving contrast between close to the speaker or hearer and the distal. Japanese is such a language. Speaker proximal and hearer proximal versus distal versus remote involves the contrast between close to the speaker or hearer, the distal, and a very far away from both speaker or hearer, or either. Hausa is supposed to be such a language. In addition to distance, demonstratives of place may also indicate whether the reference is visible or out of sight at a higher or lower elevation, that is uphill or downhill, upriver, downriver, or in a particular direction. This leads to further elaboration of the number of demonstratives as a particular language. Meso can show us. Meso has a three-way proximal versus medial versus distal system, together with a demonstrative that goes with non-visible items. Furthermore, medial and distal demonstratives are specified for level. That is, whether the referent is at the same level as the speaker or at a higher or a lower level. Note that these level and visibility features are not deictic per se, as they do not specify location vis-a-vis the deictic center. They are additions to deictic pronominals. Diesel also notes that there are, in many languages, that there are certain types of demonstratives that do not carry a specific distance feature. The German demonstrative das is putatively one of them. When the speakers want to differentiate between a proximal and distal referent, they must add the locational adverbs here, this, etc. to das. That's also not very unlike the English that, which does not also indicate a spatial contrast in the absence of an explicit contrast with this. So when you say rub off that spot on your nose, please, it's clearly a proximate observation that you're making. However, you can use the distal demonstrative. Cross-linguistically, spatial demonstratives may also inflect or mark other non-deictic features such as ontology, number, and gender. Ontology is best reflected in English, in which here and there are used for locations, while this and that for other types of entities. So using something distinctly for spatial versus other regular reference. Demonstratives can also be specified for number features, such as the distinction between this and these, that and those. Gender marking involves sensitivity to animacy or humanness. Santali is an excellent illustration of these last two facts, as all its proximal, distal, and remote demonstratives mark both number and inanimacy or animacy of the head noun. As we've seen earlier, South Asian languages also show complex patterns of interactions of demonstratives with case. In Hindi, demonstratives assumes an oblique case in the context of a case mark nominal. In Meso, the system seems to be much more complex. When the demonstrative is used with an ergative, instrumental, or locative nominal, the demonstrative changes its form and receives a morpheme an, as well as a suprasegmental tone changing process. And Zuali characterizes this phenomenon as a system of case agreement. Demonstratives can also, of course, be used with time expressions. This is because in natural language, time is commonly metaphorically structured in spatial terms. As a consequence, temporal expressions frequently develop from spatial terms. In such reconceptualizations, the speech time is taken to be the deictic center from which the past and present is distinguished. So when you say, I was still in school then, and I'll be ready then, this use of English then for both past and future reference is always distinguished by the fact that it is not at the deictic center. So when you use, so now in this case is used in contrast with the two thens. Most languages, of course, have independent time deictic expressions like soon, ago, yesterday, etc. that are not derived from demonstratives. However, they can also employ demonstratives or spatial deictics for temporal reference. Diesel points to a language called Urabu Kapur as one such language where the demonstrative pe may be used to indicate then. In fact, the English spatial expression then is the temporal, in fact, the English temporal expression then itself has developed from a spatial root. Discourse deixis is an extension of spatial deixis as well. Since the discourse consists of a string of successive words and utterances in a sequence, The use of deictic expressions to refer to word in an utterance in this sequence is quite natural. In this instance, however, the deictic center is not defined and must really be located at terms of the point at which the speaker uses a deictic expression, as it is from that point, to quote Deixis, from where the interlocutor's attention is directed to linguistic elements along the string of words and utterances. As Buehler 1934 observed, if discourse deictic expressions could speak, they would speak as follows. Look ahead or back along the band of the present utterance. There something will be found that actually belongs here, where I am, so that it can be connected with now follows. Or the other way around. What comes after me belongs there. It is only displaced from that position to relief. To illustrate this, look at English that, which is used for discourse deixis. I was really interested particularly because he was saying that a lot of the leaning was going to be towards choreography, and that was my particular interest. I really didn't like technique. I'm too really lazy for that, I think, and that was my interest in it. That's how I sort of got started in it. All these four instances of that are discourse anaphoric uses, where the referent is a preceding proposition. In each case, the deictic center for determining which proposition to look for has to be determined at the point the distal demonstrative is used, as it is entirely up to the speaker whether she wants to refer to some chunk of something which had already been said. In all the uses, the each that refers to some chunk. The English proximal demonstrative, this is often most used as a cataphor, as announcing a piece of discourse. All I know is this: the detective didn't murder the victim. In a language like Mizo, which is richly specified for Deixis, it is only the proximal and invisible demonstrative that are used for discourse Deixis. The distal demonstratives that have level specifications are not available for such anaphoric uses. There's also another important point about Deixis that can be used to understand pronominals. In many languages of the world, third-person pronouns may be indistinct from one or other spatial demonstratives. As for example in Hindi, where wo means both he or she as well as that. This is a common phenomenon. Demonstratives and deictic elements undergo grammaticalization to form articles and pronominals. Both English he and she are said to have been historically derived from anaphorically demonstrative pronouns. In fact, from a cross-linguistic perspective, such grammaticalization has been claimed to cover many other categories as well. Demonstratives are considered to be the source for synchronically available relative pronouns, for example, English that, complementizers, for example, English that, even conjunctions, copulars, directional preverbs, focus markers, and many other grammatical morphemes. This grammaticalization always creates doublets, such that an inner system does not produce the loss of a demonstrative system. This historical grammaticalization approach can be contrasted with the tradition from generative work initiated by Leo and Kanan Pollock's decompositional syntactic proposal that demonstratives consist of a definite article plus a deictic element. Under this approach, demonstratives like that, this, then, and there are to be understood as having two components, where the first is a definite article and the second is the deictic element referring to place on time. A relative pronoun is argued to be derivationally related to the demonstrative, as here the definite article is replaced by an indefinite expression. Furthermore, the distinction between pronominal and adnominal demonstratives is that the former are actually phrasal elements, which contain a silent head noun, which adnominal demonstratives simply lack. A choice between the grammaticalization with the decompositional approaches is a matter of theoretical persuasion. Two observations of South Asian languages seem to me to argue for a more syntactic and articulate structure for demonstrative noun phrase. The data for this particular set of observations comes from Mizo, which has an unusual pattern of demonstrative doubling whenever a specific reference to a prior mentioned nominal reading of the head noun is intended. In such cases, the demonstrative appears twice, once prenominally and the other postnominally. So if you say this flower, this, so this, it means this specific flower. In an approach that looks at demonstratives as decomposed to multiple syntactic heads, this seems to be best placed to describe this phenomenon. Another unusual pattern that favors a syntactic decomposition analysis is from Santali. As Zeed 1972 has observed, Santali demonstratives may have many other forms, so they can have beyond just demonstration. So Santali demonstratives may have intensive forms, such as this very one, just forms, as in just this, as well as elements that indicate evidential connotations such as that seen, that heard. An analysis which sees adnominal demonstratives as phrasal and formed in the interaction of many heads would be better placed to describe the existence of these forms, rather than an approach that only looks at grammaticalization.